Now, it's not done mathematically, but I feel fine calling it. Arsenal are 15 points behind Liverpool in the Premier League this season with about 10 games left to play. So today I'm joined by John Mackenzie and JJ Bull to ask the question, why didn't Arsenal win it this year? Now, JJ, there were a few caveats as to why Arsenal didn't win the league this season. What are they?
Well, they are, I think, red cards and injuries, but we're going to review those. So red cards is where we're going to start. And what I want to do is look at those red cards, because some of them did seem quite harsh. And if they were harsh, they will be awarded the points that they would have had when the scoreline was what it was when they got the red card.
Good Lord.
Yes.
Okay.
They've had 5 red cards, which for me is too many.
Right.
Too many red cards.
I think it's too many for them as well.
Well, yes. And the first one was against Brighton. Very harsh when Declan Rice was kicking the ball away. And I'm going to give them 3 points for that because it's really harsh. No, it's so minute. Even I'm going to give them that.
Okay.
Man City 2-2, Trossard boots the ball away at half-time, towards half-time, and he's on a yellow card. That's his own fault, no points. Bournemouth 2-0 defeat. Saliba gets sent off because he stops a player from running in behind the high line. That's kind of harsh. Maybe Ben White could have caught him. I'm going to give them 1 point for that to be nice, just to play the game. Lewis Skelly gets sent off against West Ham, 1-0 down, no points. Yeah. And also Lewis Skelly gets sent off against Wolves, but they won that anyway. So they have a maximum of 4 points of harshly treatedness.
Okay.
Liverpool are on 70 points. Arsenal would have been on 59 with those 4 points, which is still not good. They've got a game in hand. Opta's predicted table says that Liverpool will finish the season on 90 points, which is a good total. And Arsenal will finish on 76, and it would be 80 with those 4 extra points, which is obviously lower than when they finished second last season with 89, and lower when they finished second with 84 the season before. So it's not just red cards.
No.
It might actually all be down to injuries. Let's have a look at that. So according to Transfermarkt, Saka will have missed 24 games in all competitions by the end of the season. I'm not sure exactly what the numbers, but just go with this. This is what the Transfermarkt numbers say. Havertz 21 games, Odegaard 13, Ben White 25, Jesus 25. It's a lot of games that these players have missed. And that means they basically have no goals in the team, and you need goals to win games. Now, since 21-22, which I'm saying is Arteta's first good year, because he'd shipped out the players he didn't want and started to build his own team, Arsenal scored 292 goals. Bukayo Saka has scored or assisted 28.4% of those.
That's a huge amount.
It's a large amount, yes. As you can see, it's quite a lot. Then behind him, you've got Martinelli, then Odegaard. So you can see the problem here. In fact, all these players, apart from Martinelli, who has been injured a little bit.
And he's been riding the bench a bit recently as well.
Well, there you go, exactly. So, and you have this other thing as well with creating chances is very important. Now, in open play, you'll see that Odegaard and Saka create all of the chances in this time since Arteta's really been in charge here. So you're missing that many open play chances. Also, set plays. So Saka is by far and away the biggest creator of chances from set plays, 66 in the same time frame. So you're missing like one of your big chance creations because set pieces account for a lot of goals for Arsenal. This season, 10 goals so far, it's 19%. Last season was 22%. The season before that was 17% of the goals come from set pieces. So when you're missing those players and the delivery that you send in, that's bad. Kai Havertz, who, whatever you think of him, is a big miss too. So once he joined in 2023, Arsenal scored 143 goals. He's scored or assisted 22% of them.
That's, again, a big number.
Huge amount of goals to miss. Now, I want to know if any teams have won the league with this similar amount of injuries, because maybe they've done it in the past and it's just an excuse. Yes, Joe?
Manchester City.
Well, I have them written down here. In 23-24, last season, when they won the treble, Kevin De Bruyne only played 35.7% of available minutes in the league.
That's few.
Well, it's okay. Stones also missed some, Grealish missed some, but that's really it. They still played a lot of minutes. The season before that, when they won the league, nobody was missing really. The season before that, nobody was really missing. Season before that, Aguero missing a bit. Coronavirus hit him quite hard. Now, the season before that was 19-20, which is, of course, when Liverpool won the league. And you had Matip, Keita, Milner were under 30% of minutes. That's kind of it. All the really important players were there the entire time. Season before that, when Man City won the league, De Bruyne was the only player really important under 30% of minutes. Season before that, City won it again. Won it every year. Only Laporte, Zinchenko and Toure, they weren't really playing, so that's fine. Season before that, Chelsea won it. No real missing injury players. And then I got bored of looking all the way back.
Yeah, I was actually getting a little bored listening as well. In fact, entertain me, Phil Hay.
One of the most iconic celebrations of all time involved Graham Souness, then Galatasaray's manager, planting a flag in the centre circle of bitter rivals Fenerbahce after a Turkish Cup tie. He made it out alive, somehow. Belgium got a little taste of this over the weekend after Club Bruges beat Cercle Bruges in the city's derby. At full time, Club Bruges' Arden Jashari did a Souness by running to stick a flag in the centre circle. Cercle Bruges' goalkeeper went mad and a big scuffle ensued. These clubs don't play again this season, but next time they do, I've got a feeling they'll be keeping receipts. You'll get little stories like this and all the big football news too by signing up to the Athletic FC newsletter. Click on the link below to join us.
So I put it to you that no team can really sustain losing all these attacking players or this many players and win the league. It's not really ever happened. If it has, please tell me in the comments, along with other things that I'm often wrong about. So is this season good enough for Arsenal? 76 points would have made them finish fourth, third, second, third, an average of third basically over the last few seasons.
Yeah.
And the new average needed to win the league is 87.7 points. So my conclusion is, without goal scorers, they can't score, which means you can't win. So injuries are their biggest problem of all. In fact, injuries are their only problem. Or are they?
I don't know.
John's there.
Oh, John, yes. Well, John, let's pick up with that point about them not being able to score that JJ mentioned there. Why has their football not been as effective this season?
Yeah, I think you can argue that there's tactical explanations here as well. In order to answer that, we have to ask the question, how are Arsenal trying to score goals? And Arsenal are a possession team, so they're trying to create goals by possessing the ball, generally building up from the back, moving it into the final third and generating chances, right? Simple enough. And actually, if you look at the numbers on this, Arsenal are very, very good at that process of taking the ball from their goal and moving it to the opposition goal. So I've got some data from Photovision here. And as you can see, this is just looking at how successful their build-up is as a percentage across the rest of the league. And as we can see, they're right up there with Manchester City in terms of build-up success. So a team like Arsenal, they're really good at taking the ball, building up out from the back, moving it into the final third. So what's the problem? Well, actually, we can break down what they're trying to do a little bit more, because the way that you generate goals isn't just about moving the ball from one side of the pitch to the other. It's about the manner in which you're arriving in the final third as well. So I've got some more numbers from Photovision here, which starts breaking down the ways that Arsenal are arriving in the final third. So what I'm looking at here is line-breaking passes. Now, a line-breaking pass is just any pass which breaks a line, okay, a line of opposition pressure. So let's imagine that the centre-back passes it to the centre midfielder through the two forwards for the opposition who are pressing them. That's a line-breaking pass. And as you can see, Manchester City right at the top of this list, as you might expect, because they're very good at progressing the ball down the field. Actually, interestingly enough, Arsenal fairly low down in terms of line-breaking passes in general, and I think that's partly because they sort of just force opponents back and back and back. But we can also look at the way that they actually generate a lot of these line-breaking passes, the format or nature of those line-breaking passes. So we've got three different metrics here. So we've got line-breaking passes around. Now that just means when you play the ball around the opposition block.
I can see where this is going already, John.
Can you?
So, yeah. Thank you.
The other option is you can play over the block, so you can play balls in behind.
Yeah, shout out to West Ham.
Yeah, shout out to West Ham. Interestingly, Man City quite high up in this as well, and there's been some stuff that Pep Guardiola's talked about recently where he said we've struggled a little bit in terms of building up against man-to-man presses, but because we have Haaland, we can play the ball over the top to him. So lots of line-breaking passes for them actually coming over the opposition block.
Yeah.
And then the other one we've got here is line-breaking passes through in build-up. Arsenal, obviously, majority of their passes are going around the opposition block, their line-breaking passes. They're not going over very much. They do go through the centre, but much less than a lot of the other teams. And if you look at the teams who do go through the centre, you've got Man City, Chelsea, Villa, Liverpool, a lot of the big teams there at the top trying to generate chances through the middle. And the big question is, why might that be the case? Why is it more dangerous, potentially, for you to arrive at the... Oh, you've got an answer for this.
Because they're closer to the goal.
I think there's a few different options here, which I think is worth us talking through. So I've got Arsenal here coming through the middle. Let's just think about why it might be more dangerous for Odegaard to have the ball in this kind of area. As you've said, yes, it's more direct, right? You're going towards where the goal is. You have more of the goal to aim at in this situation. If you're coming at it with the ball from a wide area, the angle into that goal is super narrow, right, that you're aiming at. Whereas when you're here, you've got both sides of the goal to aim at. So in that sense, yes, going direct is going to help you. But I also think that when you're running through the centre, you have way more options available to you. You can go either way. So Odegaard can go right or left. He can go through the middle to Havertz. Each one of those players, if they receive the ball, is going to have a much more dangerous chance than they would if you're coming in from the side. Because if we're coming in from the side, what we start ending up with is a reduction of those chances down. So let's say that Saka is here with the ball. He's got the option of going across the box, and then an option of a cut back to the edge of the box, and then I guess he could recycle it around. But he's definitely hampered by the sideline. He can't go down the right-hand side unless he's going to dribble. So you're reducing the amount of dangerous options, I think, that are available to you in this situation. And I think there's one more area where actually you get quite a bit of benefit going through the centre, because let's say one of the defenders decides to close Odegaard down, what they're actually doing then is creating space that can be exploited, whereas in the opposite situation with Saka here, let's imagine that they've got their back four in this scenario, maybe even a centre midfielder dropping in to help out. If that player comes forward, you're not evacuating the space. There's still a player behind him who can step into that space and stop it from being dangerous as well. So I think all of this points towards the fact that if you go through the middle, I think you're just much more likely to generate dangerous chances. Now, that's all very theoretical. I just wanted to run through one sequence of play from Arsenal's game against Manchester United recently, just to show you how this plays out in practice. So what I've done here is I've just drawn the Manchester United players actually in their block. So we talked about building through, building around. So building around is going around this yellow blob. Building through is going through the middle of that, and then obviously going over is playing the ball into the back line. Now this is right at the beginning of this sequence, and what we can see is actually Arsenal quite nicely set up to actually progress the ball through the centre of the field if they want. They've got Thomas Partey running into this space here, a fairly big gap between Eriksen and Xerxes here, and if Partey got the ball, plenty of options for them to actually progress the ball through the middle of the field. However, they decide not to do this. What they decide to do is play the ball to Martin Odegaard, who is here. And it's worth saying that this becomes a problem already because Arsenal actually do rely quite heavily on Odegaard to do a lot of early phase build-up stuff. So he drops out of the block into this front line of build-up in order to move the ball through the lines. That means that you're taking him outside of the block. He's quite a good small spaces player, and so you're reducing the effectiveness of that block. You've got Jurrien Timber taking his place in here. As we'll see, what ends up happening is that Odegaard drops out, and in this instance actually just carries the ball along the field and ends up on the other side of the pitch. So we end up with this scenario here. Plays it out to Calafiori, the left back. And what they're trying to do here is just stretch the Manchester United block. And as we can see, they've actually created quite a bit of space between Xerxes and Garnacho over on this side. Odegaard is in that gap. So the obvious thing to do is play the ball to him. And then you think, well, you've got nice access into the middle, which is actually what happens. The ball goes to Odegaard. He's got a bit of space and time on the ball. He does get closed down quite quickly, but he's able to play a bounce pass into Declan Rice here, who then just immediately returns it to him. And you're like, okay, brilliant. What you've done is you've got inside the block, you've received the ball facing down the field, plenty of opportunity now for you to build centrally. But the problem is, if we actually look at the options that Odegaard has available to him, there's just not really much going on. You've got the wide forward over here, but they're being tracked by the wing back. Rice is being marked. Odegaard's under pressure. There's no one in front of him for him to actually use as a support player here. The only option he really has is to go back, and that's exactly what happens. He ends up recycling it to one of the centre-backs, who then pushes it forward to Thomas Partey, who is the pivot player here. They reset. Manchester United are able to get back into their block shape, and Arsenal still have a few players inside the block again, but again, there's a few issues here. One of them is Mikel Merino, the striker. He's not on the line of the ball. He's moved out of the way, so even if you are able to move the ball or progress the ball in a vertical way, he's not really going to be helping out. Martin Odegaard is running out of the way. Yes, he's drawing a player with him, but it's not really making things much easier for Arsenal. The only option they have is to play the ball to Declan Rice, who has a player behind him, who goes and pressures him immediately, and so what he immediately does then is dribble out of the block. So they are finding passes into the block, but they're immediately removing themselves from the block because they don't have the structure in place to be able to actually benefit from it.
They don't like it inside the block, John.
They don't like it inside the block. The ball gets recycled around, so again, that's it's the easiest way of doing that. You're going to be under much less pressure if you're outside the block. Jurrien Timber ends up with the ball. They've done the same thing with Manchester United again, right? They've created a massive space between Xerxes and Eriksen. Declan Rice has got into that space, and you're thinking, okay, great. Jurrien Timber plays the ball inside, and now you've got access to the centre of the pitch, which is true. You've got Martin Odegaard here, easy pass into him, and you'd think that he'd be able to turn and start exploiting this space. The problem is that he doesn't have any structural support again. The Arsenal players here have all moved across expecting the wide overload. Mikel Merino, the striker, has drifted out wide. The idea here being that they're going to get an overload of players, so it'll be easier for them to possess the ball. But it just means that this option now just becomes pointless. There's not really any means for them to play centrally. If Thomas Partey was a little bit closer to Odegaard, you could play the bounce pass in here. If the striker was in between the two centre-backs, you might have the option of developing here. Again, we have the same thing we talked about already, which is centre midfielders drop out of the block to receive the ball. If this is a centre-back and then Declan Rice is here, again, you have more structure in the centre of the block in order to possess the ball well. As it is, they don't have that capability, and so what they do is, as they inevitably do, they end up moving into the final third in the wide area. So it's what we're talking about. They're very good at progressing the ball. They've taken the ball from the back to the front. They've arrived in the final third, but when they arrive in the final third, they're in this situation where Manchester United have a back five in place, so they can just force a player out towards him. They've still got four effectively centre-backs patrolling the box, and then they've got one of the centre-mids doubling up on Nwaneri to make sure that he can't, if he does do Dalot here, he's going to get trapped by someone else. The only option they have then really is to play the ball back out to Odegaard, who can like hit the back post through a half-space cross, or maybe Nwaneri can try and hit the byline and get the ball across as well. But the problem is that this is immediately setting off these three Arsenal players into that back post run. Because when Nwaneri actually decides he's not going to play the pass, they recycle it again, Saliba ends up with the ball, and now those three players are essentially just lined up as though they're trying to receive a set piece. They're not structurally well set up in order to help central progression. Because Saliba sees that Nwaneri's moved inside, and so he thinks, great, we've got access to the centre, I'll play the ball to him. But because there's no structure there, Nwaneri receives the ball back to goal, ends up losing it because he's got no support because those players aren't anywhere near him. And as a result, Manchester United are able to win the ball and then counter-attack from there. Now, a lot of Arsenal fans have said to me when I've shown this sequence of play, well, this is why we don't build up through the middle, because if you lose the ball in the middle, it's super dangerous. You're open, as you mentioned before. The opposition have the opportunity to then attack from there. But my argument would be that the reason why Arsenal lost the ball there is because they haven't structured their build-up well enough to be able to retain possession of the ball there, which means that Nwaneri's lost the ball because he's got no support. But also when they've lost the ball, they then have no access to counter-press to make it hard for Manchester United to build from there. So the issue then we have is that Arsenal are very good at build-up, but when they build up, they end up moving the ball into those wide areas, which reduces the effectiveness of their build-up. And I think that is probably the main reason that explains the lack of open play goals that they have, and they have had for a couple of seasons.
It also explains the huge number of open play chances from Odegaard and Saka, specifically on that right-hand side. Yeah. When you take away the quality of those two from that side, you instantly lose all of your open play chance creation.
And I think it's worth adding as well, it's not just that they're predictable because they go down the wide areas, they're predictable because they go down the same side, they go down that right side, they generate these overloads in those areas where they've got Odegaard and Saka, where they're two best players. The issue then becomes that you're not only just becoming predictable and going wide, you're predictable in going to the right-hand side. So around 50% of their attacks came down the right against Manchester United. That means that teams can prepare for them much better as well.
Thanks, John. Very interesting. We'll be back with John in just a moment to talk about some set pieces. But before we do that, have a look at this. It's a new audio documentary from The Athletic. I think you'll find it interesting.
So we're on the corner here of Very New Road and Sherborne Street. This is what was known as Counterfeit Street.
So tell me about the biggest seizure of Operation Vulcan.
Had intelligence that there was a storage yard. There was 207 containers on that storage yard. We had over 580 tons of counterfeit clothing. That was at a street value of £87 million.
It is remarkable, Wellesbourne Market. I've never seen anything like it in the UK. There's a lot of attention on the flagrant way fake football shirts are being sold online. But this is on the ground, in the faces of law enforcement. Go down the line and look at the shirts uncovered here. We have Borussia Dortmund, Arsenal, Manchester United, Juventus, Real Madrid, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, Tottenham and Barcelona. Well, I'm in Malta looking at the counterfeit football shirts market. This is what happens when the counterfeiters don't get their way and customs step in and seize huge amounts of fake football shirts destined for the online market or the market in your local area. Do you have English teams, Premier League teams? Oh, the Chelsea one. Imitation, yeah? Not real. The shirts that guy was selling in his stall were being made not in China, here in Morocco.
For more on that, click the link in the top comment. But for now, John, let's talk more about set pieces because Arsenal can't do them anymore, can they? And it's sad.
Well, we've already talked about Arsenal's issues in open play. The way that they've overcome that in terms of the goal scoring front in previous seasons is by bumping the numbers up that they score from goals from set pieces. And that's a pretty sustainable way of doing things because, as we've said, they're really good at sustainably moving the ball down the field. Yes, they're arriving in these wide areas, but from those wide areas you can actually win a lot of corners. And Mikel Arteta Arteta has actually made Arsenal very dangerous from corners in the last few seasons, and so it's sort of ironed out some of the issues with open play scoring. But this season, as you say, particularly this calendar year, they've dropped off a little bit. Now, I'm going to fall back on some of the things that JJ's been talking about, because a big part of that, I think, comes down to injuries. So when it comes to corners, the two most important things are the person taking the corner and the person receiving the corner. And Arsenal have received injuries to both of those factors within set pieces. So we've talked about Kai Havertz, obviously 6'3", 6'4", big lad.
Sure.
He's going to be an important target in the box. There's also other factors such as, for example, Arsenal have started playing someone like Miles Lewis-Skelly as a fullback rather than someone like Calafiori, who's more of a centre-back profile. Again, you're reducing the height of the players that you have in that sort of space. So I think you can make an argument that the lack of personnel in those spaces in terms of receiving has impacted them there. But we've also talked about Bukayo Saka being out for a long time. He is a fantastic corner taker from the right-hand side, plays those in-swingers into the front post with just like whip, low trajectory, which gives you nice power, so you can just get flick-ons into the goal. They've missed him for a long part of the season, and that has definitely impacted them. On the other side, they've had Declan Rice, who's been injured a little bit, and injured actually in the foot. So I can't remember what the actual specific injury was, but there was a time when he was actually playing but not taking corners, and I suspect that was because he was carrying an injury on his foot. He's been a lot less consistent in his delivery. I think last season his back post deliveries in particular were just fantastic. He's not been quite so consistent this season as well. So those, I think, are both factors that come into it. Okay. But I wanted to talk about one other thing that I've noticed from the last few games, which is that I feel as though in previous seasons Arsenal have been super creative in their set-piece routines, and it feels as though that's maybe dropping off a little bit in more recent games. So again, let's stay with the Manchester United game, where Arsenal have about 8 corners. They actually use the same routine pretty much across the board for all of their corners. So what I'm going to talk about here is in terms of the players they have, because this looks very confusing, right? But there's two areas we should really focus on. So we've got targets in the middle. So these are the guys who are going to be the really good ball headers. So we've got Gabriel. We know that he's a cheat code when it comes to scoring from corners. Mikel Merino, also a very good header of the ball. The idea basically is that Declan Rice is going to play the corner, and Arsenal are going to try and get one of these two on the ball with a decent chance of scoring. And then what they've been doing more recently, you'll see this, is that they have these disruptors at the back post, and they sit quite a long way back. As the ball comes in, they're going to run into Manchester United's zonal area here to try and disrupt things. You've got a few players as well pinning over here, but that's the general process. You're going to play the ball in. These guys are going to try and cause disruptions, and if they can get a header, bonus. But the big idea is you want to get Gabriel or Mikel Merino in on the ball. So let's just look at how this one opens out. So you can see Gabriel goes one post, Mikel Merino goes to the other. They're going to crash the box. The disruptors are coming in here. Actually, in this one, 2 of them sit at the back, so if the ball goes long, they can head it back in. Again, hopefully getting one of these two on the ball. Now, the thing that I think is really interesting here is that Manchester United clearly more worried about Gabriel than they are about Mikel Merino here. Lindelof, I think, is supposed to be tracking Merino, but I think because they've seen Gabriel getting a bit of a run, they've tried to double up on him a little bit. And this is something I think that's been happening quite a bit as well. Gabriel is the number one threat. If you can be physical on him, stop him from getting into dangerous spaces. There's actually a corner later on where he basically gets manhandled. It's arguably a penalty from that. We've not seen those being called as much recently, so teams are being a bit more physical. That's the general process of what's going to happen here. Disruptors are going to come in. These two guys are going to mix up which post they go for or which area they're aiming for. They may start in different starting positions, so later on, this is from the other side as well, just to show that all of these players are basically in the same position. You've got 2 players pinning out wide, one of the guys on the edge of the box, the 2 target men, and then the disruptors at the back post. We also have one where Gabriel actually starts from in the disruptor position to get into that box as well, but everything else is the same. They run this routine for every single one of their corners, and I wonder whether or not that sort of dropping out of creativity and finding different ways of causing teams problems has left them more recently as well. I don't know why that would be the case, but it's something that stood out to me. And one final point to make is that set pieces are just very variance heavy. The ball can bounce favourably and fall to a player that's just completely unplanned. Maybe that's been going against Arsenal in the last few weeks. They've not been able to have the rub of the green coming through as much for them. But all of this, does suggest that actually their set pieces have been a little bit less sustainable than recent. And I think that's the point I want to end on, is like maybe this isn't just about Arsenal being a little bit unlucky or losing players through injury. Maybe it's just that in the previous season they slightly overperformed, because if you look at the underlying numbers from the last 3 seasons, actually on almost every front, Arsenal are putting up around the same sort of volume of set pieces and the same sort of quality from set pieces. So if we look at set pieces per 90 over the last 3 seasons, Arsenal are between 8.6 and 9. Pretty consistently, so a very small margin of variance there. The shots that they're taking are between 2.5 and 2.8. So again, very, very small margin here. And then even if we want to talk about the quality of those chances in terms of expected goals, the last 3 seasons Arsenal have been putting up between 0.4 and 0.47. So again, they're still generating the same number and sort of quality of set-piece chances, but the number that really stands out to me is the amount of goals they've scored from them. Because if we look at last season, they're scoring around 0.6 goals per 90 from set-pieces, whereas the other 2 seasons they're much closer to 0.4. So the big question is whether or not actually last season was unrealistic as a season I think they scored 22 goals in the end last season from set-pieces. If that's them having to variance high, is it really worth their while building up in these wide areas and relying on set pieces if they have to overperform on set pieces in order to be sustainable in terms of goal scoring?
And still not win the league.
Yeah.
Okay, big questions. I mean, the last one, JJ, from me really is we've heard about why their play hasn't worked this season, along with some of those caveats at the beginning. But do you think there's a chance they've missed their best opportunity to win it? I feel like this season was the one.
It feels like this was the one. Do you remember a little while ago they said they were ahead of schedule when they finished second?
Yeah.
So I think it is relevant. And my theory, and I think it's not really a theory, people just say it, it's a thing, right? That football comes in cycles, but your squads, you can have like 3 or 4 year cycles of squads. So you build your players, you bring people in, you adapt tactically, and you try and get to a peak, and it naturally sort of starts resetting. And the really good managers and really well run clubs have a natural cycle that just keeps perpetuating. So if you have a good run of form, you might win a few titles, but you've got the next team coming through. That's what you've got. And we can see that Arsenal have improved massively under Mikel Arteta. He's done very well. Because when he came in was 1920 here, when they're finished 8th, and then he takes them up and they finish like second and second. So he improves them each season. Now the 2 seasons ago was when there was the overperformance when they weren't supposed to get there. So this year, they could build on it and really go big and try and push for the title because they've had 2 seconds in a row. This could be the year. So maybe this was their chance. But a team we can maybe compare them to see whether this is a real theory or not is Liverpool, because they've went through something similar, right? So Klopp came in, same sort of thing. You see it here when they were in 8th. So he comes in, he improves them, even though they dropped out a little bit here. He makes them better, they win some cups, and he builds players. So he puts in 2 or 3 key players each season, Van Dijk, Salah, Fabinho. Each season they improve slowly, they get better, they eventually win the title. As we've seen lots of other examples of clubs who've gone through this kind of squad building process. When you peak, you often have a bit of a dip, and then you have a bit of a wobble, and then you might get to another build, have a peak, and then the same sort of thing goes on.
Peak, dip, wobble, build.
Something like that. Man City are the ones who kind of broken it, and Sir Alex Ferguson as well at Man United did the same sort of thing. But you see Liverpool did that, and now they're sort of having their wobble here, but they're going to end up finishing first, so arguably they've had another peak with their cycle. But look what they've done. So over time, they won the league in 1920, 2019-20, not the year 1920. Did they win the league that year? They might have done.
They could have done.
Maybe.
I'll find out.
I don't think so.
Okay, well, let's find out. We'll tell you the answers to that soon. But they had a big drop-off. So when they won the league that year, there was a massive drop-off of about 30 points. And a lot of the reason for that is injuries, especially to key players. So Van Dijk was injured for a lot. So we saw the rise of Nate Phillips to our screens, and that's what we had. Again, a huge drop-off in quality, but Thiago, Jordan Henderson, Jota, all also injured. So they're missing really key players, huge drop-off. Helps explain that. Similar to Arsenal. Next season, they bring in a few players, Luis Diaz, Konate. They're kind of building a new team here. And the season after that, they bring in Darwin Núñez. So changing the profile of striker. Roberto Firmino's at the end of the cycle, I would say. They peak, they come through, and then the end of that kind of time is done. Firmino's out. In comes Darwin Núñez. Completely different kind of striker. So they're building something new. And Alexander-Arnold starts moving inside around about then, I think, right? So you get that sort of change as well. And then the season after that, they rebuild their whole midfield. This is a whole new squad coming through. So this is what they're doing under Klopp. And then now, at the end of that sort of cycle, Klopp doesn't see the whole thing through. Arne Slot comes in, adds some tactical controls. They've got that. There's no injuries to any key players. They've got 3 of their best players who are maybe doing their last season at the club, so you've got that added momentum. Plus, Arsenal completely drop off and Man City fall into outer space. So they've got the run. This was their chance to do something, and they've done it. And you can look at their squad minutes over the last few seasons of how they sort of built that. So this graph here shows percentage of minutes played, and you kind of read it from bottom to top rather than left to right, as I've been doing for the last 2 years. So what you see here in the middle is the peak age of players. 24 to 28.
So up the top is the
more minutes you've played at the top.
And then to the right is how old they are.
Exactly. Okay. So the older you are, the further over on the right-hand side you appear, and the more minutes you play, the further at the top you are.
Cool.
And what you really want is a lot of bunching in the peak area, in the middle, at the top, but you also want to have young players coming through, because that's going to be your future. You'll see a lot of them down here, so they should then progress to go into the middle at some point and then into the top. And then you also want some experience over here. We've done this in a couple of other shows that you can find on our channel, where we look through what the ideal squad makeup is. But it goes from this in 22-23 to this in 23-24. You can see they've not got all the key players playing the real bulk of the minutes. They're kind of missing a few through injuries and lots of things going on there. But this season, you can see all their best players, Van Dijk, Salah, Gravenberch, Alexander-Arnold, Szoboszlai, they're all right in the peak bit. So they've timed it really, really well. It's kind of come to the peak of what you've got there. So let's look in whether Arsenal have wasted their chance or not, which sounds harsh, but there might be some truth to it. So in 2019-20, not 1920, Mikel Arteta joined.
By the way, if you want to know, West Bromwich Albion won the First Division title in 1920. Liverpool were 4th.
And they've been building since then.
They've been building since then.
But Arsenal have been building since the year 2019.
West Brom have had a dip since then as well.
But Arsenal have been building since the year 2019-20, in case we don't include John's bit about West Brom there. In 2021, he starts shipping out...
Arsenal finished 10th in that season.
That's good. Well, how about in the year 2020, when Arsenal started shipping out all the players they didn't want and bringing in ones they did want? So what Mikel Arteta wanted, he brings in Thomas Partey, Gabriel joins that year. 21-22, just like Liverpool did, you bring in 3 key players at a time. So you bring in like Ben White, Odegaard, Ramsdale. They start to get better in finishing the way that Arteta's designing them to do. They bring in Jesus, Zinchenko, and Trossard, a few other players. They finish second ahead of schedule. That was that year. So they're starting to climb. The squad build is working. Their tactics are all built towards a common goal. They bring in Rice, Havertz, Timber. They're really going for it. They're spending money on key players like Declan Rice. And so this season should be the year they go big. Because last season they spent big, but they still had Man City who won the treble. That was a big year, but you can see in the squad planning, you can see that Man City should start to drop off because their squad's aging. You could have planned this. And so this year should be the year they go big, but this year, the things that John's talked about with tactics have kind of squashed them. And if they had lose those key players in those areas, that's going to also squash them. And so they didn't buy anyone except for a left back, a backup to Declan Rice, and basically a goalkeeper they already had on loan. So that's not maybe what you should have done. So although they've gone up here, at this point here, like, have they really underperformed? Have they missed their chance? Maybe. But you can see their squad build up a few years ago. It's okay. It's hard to really take anything from this, but we can look where they're going now. This was last season. See the amount of minutes that all their key players are kind of playing over here. Saka's lots of minutes over here, so they're really, really going for it. And this season, you're missing every single attacking player. So in this top bit here where you want your players, none of them are attackers. They're all defensive players. So you've lost all your attacking players. They didn't bring in anyone else who would really have made them stronger in that part of the pitch. That, I think, is a really obvious key thing to have done. So I think Arsenal may have already peaked. Now was the year to have gone big, but Liverpool are probably going to have a dip now because they've gone through it, so they'll have a little drop. Man City will be building, so they're going to get towards there, which means it's wide open for Arsenal next year. And if they just simply don't have all their players injured and they don't get red cards, they get an extra 4 points.
By a striker.
If they have more attacking central players who are playing through the central bit of the pitch, which is what I think they should do.
Yeah.
Especially based off what John taught us earlier.
Yeah.
By God, it might be next year.
Yeah, okay. So it could be. Could be any year, I suppose, couldn't it? It's funny we've been talking for 30, 40 minutes, and what we're really saying, after some very smart analysis, don't get me wrong, is Arsenal should buy a striker and play through the middle. Yeah, is that right? Maybe that's something Andrea Berta can resolve. Arsenal's incoming sporting director has written about in a fabulous piece on The Athletic by Dermot Corrigan, which is linked in the description. So have a read of that and make up your own minds. Should they simply buy a striker? Maybe? I don't know. I'm an idiot.
If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. The Athletic is home to some of the world's best sports journalists, including David Ornstein, Amy Lawrence and James Horncastle. With the latest transfer news and insights on every Premier League story that matters, theathletic.com puts you inside football, and you can try it for free now for 30 days. See the link in the description.